Okay. Today we're going to start pay base. That's 82. We'll start from, I think it's like 7 lines down. The only issue that we have starting here is we have to go back and say how we got into this. We're in a huge complication here. So thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. This is 4 years, Baruch Hashem, that we're able to learn. Yeah. Okay. This is our learning. We should have the basic English. So let's go back. We're discussing an androgynous marrying a woman. And if the androgynous is a Kayan, so his wife is allowed to eat truma. That was a statement from Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, that androgynous Kayan shenasa bas Yisrael machila b'truma. So now we have a machlekes Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, if it's truma specifically, or it's also the chaz of a shaykh of a carbon. Like, how married are they really? Is it, according to Rish Lakish, well, truma is only derabanan, and this is not a real marriage, but it's good enough to allow the wife to eat truma midirabanan. According to Rabbi Yochanan, no, this is a real marriage, and not only can she eat truma midirabanan, she can even eat chaz of a shaykh, which is a deraisa. Rish Lakish proves his opinion from the fact that truma is batal, igule devela, right? These the fact that they could be batal, igul be igulim, is oila, is batal. Now, how is that a proof that it's derabanan? Because Rish Lakish really holds that kol shedarke limnos, anything that's ever counted, ever sold by number, is not batal. So why are these batal? Must be because it's a derabanan, a special leniency. Rabbi Yochanan says that really es shedarke limnos, es as opposed to kol. He changes the text of the Mishnah. That it's what's not batal, only things that are never sold by weight. It's always sold by number. However, things that are sometimes sold by weight, for example, igulim, these fig cakes, sometimes they're sold by weight. So therefore it's batal, even though it's a deraisa. So no, it's according to Rabbi Yochanan, truma is a deraisa. So why is it batal? Well, it's batal because these things are batal. Rish Lakish says these things are not batal. It's only because it's a derabanan that it's batal. So it depends on its chashivas. Do we consider it a davar shebeminyan when sometimes it's not a davar shebeminyan? That's the machlekes Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish in the teachings of Reb Meir that holds davar shebeminyan is like batal. Okay.
This anatomical abnormality, this is a move as far as avoid.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Now we had a question on Rabbi Yochanan. Well, it wasn't really a question on Rabbi Yochanan. It was the background of Rabbi Yochanan's teaching that a deraisa is also batal. Something that's deraisa is also batal. It's not because it's a derabanan. What was the source of that? Rabbi Yochanan says, well, a carbon is also batal. The slices of meat of a carbon is batal. So let's go into this brisa just outside, and then there's 2 cases in the brisa. One is a piece of meat that's tamei of a carbon, falls into 100 other pieces of meat that are tahar of a carbon meat. So it's really kachim and kachim, but one of them is tamei, and we say that the one that's tamei is batal in the 100, and the kayan can eat them all. Batal meya. Yeah, I don't know why it needs meya, but that's what. Okay. Same thing would apply to lechem apanim. 1 piece is tamei. There's 100 pieces over there. I guess we're comparing it to truma. That's why it needs mayo. Then we have another case where I have one piece of meat of a carbon that fell into 100 pieces of chulin. The carbon was tar. The chulin is tar. Over there we say it's not batal. It's not batal. Why is it not batal? So we say that why should we be mevatel it? We could just sell it to a kayan, and the kayan will eat them all. Now I know there's a difference in price between kudshim and chulin, but that's just a minor loss, and we're not going to say bittel if it's just a minor loss like that. Okay, so what's the problem over here? This creates a question on Rish Lakish. So Rish Lakish holds that something that's a deraisa is not batal, and it would only need to be a derabana. Now, this chaticha, this piece of meat, would be something that's sold sometimes by slice, by amount, not by weight. And according to Rish Lakish, that's not batal. And the only reason why it was batal before by Igulei Develo was because it's a derabanan. Here, clearly, it's a deraisa. So why are we saying that it's batal? So the Gemara answered, we're talking about that it dissolved. And it's batal because it dissolved. It's not anymore sold by minyan. It's just dissolved meat. We said if it's dissolved, then why does Rabbi Yehuda hold that it's not batal? That was another opinion in the Mishnah that we didn't mention right now. But he says min b'mina is lay batal. Min b'minai, even if it's dissolved, it's not batal. So now we left off with the question, is where we're holding. We left off with the question, so why do I have two cases in the Mishnah? One where it's batal, one where it's not batal. The case of being batal is a case of something that's tameh, falling into tahar. Both of them karbanas. We say that the tameh one is yes batal in the tar. And if you wanted to tell me, and why is it batal? Because it's nimuach, because it was dissolved. What's the case where it's not batal? And as we have a contrast in the Mishnah, in this brisa, the case that it's not batal is something that's a carbon that fell into chulin. Why do you have to switch the case? Just say the case that it's not batal is when it's not nimuach, when it didn't dissolve. That's what the Gemara does. It's called liflei b'lisnei b'dida. If you want to give me a contrast, liflei, divide it. V'nisnei b'dida, in tell me in the original case two possibilities. Why do you have to bring a case from far out to show me a contrast when in this case itself you have the same contrast, the batal and the not batal? And it depends if it's nimuach or not. The Gemara says we could have done that, but that wasn't our point. We wanted to show you that even in a case when they're both tahar, which is a case of truma, not truma, case of a carbon, a slice of meat of a carbon that fell into chulin, even in that case, we'll still say that it's not batal. Now, why is that a chiddush? Why do we have to say that? So it turns out that it's not so pashut that something tamei should become batal in everything else that's tahar. It's not so simple. When you say something is aser, is batal in something that's mutter, iser is batal in heter. That we do all the time. Iser is batal in heter. Yeah. Something prohibited is batal in what's permitted. You have 100 pieces of permitted or 60 pieces or whatever. One piece is prohibited. It's batal in the thing that's in the, it becomes batal. Yeah. But to say, let me finish and then I'll go back. But to say that something that's tamei is batal into something that's tahar, that's not so simple. It's actually machlekes in a Mishnah in Trumas, if you say that. So when we say that the tamei food, that the tamei was yes batal, that's one point. That's okay. So we're following the opinion that tamei could be batal. But when you want to say that it's not batal, if you tell me that you're still talking about tamei, I would immediately say that, well, tamei is not really batal in tar. I wanted to tell you, even something that's tar is not batal in something that's tar, which is the carbon. It's not batal in the chulin, both of them tar. That's a special chiddush to tell me that it's not really batal. So that's why we chose in the contrast that we're talking about what's not batal, we chose to say tahar bitar, that it's not batal. Okay.
So we get into this because we have two devices, one being that it's Tom A, and the other being the concept of Bittel.
Right. Yeah. So 1 second. How do we get into this? This is from a Kayan that's a androgynous is marrying a woman and she's eating truma. Question is it because truma's derabanan and the marriage is not perfect, not perfectly acceptable? Or is it because truma's really deraisa and the marriage is perfectly acceptable? And then based on how do we get into this? If truma's deraisa derabanan, that was based on why is truma batal? And why, and that whole question, why truma is batal, was based on when do we really say bittul? That's based on that machlekes. And we went back into that machlekes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, and that's where we're holding. Okay. When you talk about bittul, yeah. So Rav Amiel is Moshe Vigdar Amiel was he was the I think the chief rabbi of Belgium, and then Tel Aviv in the 30s, I think. But he wrote these amazing svarim, Midas L'Cheker Halacha, like spectacular svarim. Anyway, in there, in his introduction, I think he writes about how bittul works. So he says everything really, in its default state, is permissible. And the Torah puts on certain things prohibitions, but the default state of the whole world is permitted. So certain things have like this unique independent identity that this is treif, this is not kosher, this is whatever. So, but when it falls back into a big pile of whatever, of heter, so it loses its identity and everything just gets reabsorbed into the original state. Everything is batal. He's describing how bittul works, that it loses its independent identity. Yeah.
This is by Amiel.
Yeah. Some of his works were translated. The Midas L'Cheker Halacha. Yeah, they redid it recently. Yeah, but yeah. Okay, it's a very fun book. Okay, we're holding now by Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish, Maishna Reisha, Maishna Seifa. In the Brisa, we had two cases. We had a case of tummy slice of carbon, a chaticha of a carbon that's tummy, where we said that it was batal in 100 slices of carbonas that were tar. But why was it batal? Each piece is sometimes sold by slice. We said, well, the reason why it's batal is because it's nimuach, it's dissolved. Well, in the seifa, we said that it was tahar carbon into 100 slices of meat that was chulin, and over there you say it's not batal, but it's dissolved. So if it's dissolved, why shouldn't it be batal? Amar Rav Shisha, Breder Ravidi, Reish B'Tamas Mashkin Derabanan, Sefer Deraisa. You see, we had like sort of like a irresolvable issue here, because Reish Lakish only says something is batal if it's a derabanan. If it's a whole piece that's sold separately, it's a derabanan. So here we're dealing with the deraisa. And then you said one time it is batal, one time it's not batal. If they're both deraisa, so you told me, okay, the only way that it could be batal is because it's dissolved. But if it's dissolved, then why is the second case not batal? In other words, we don't want to make a difference between the two, that one was dissolved, one wasn't dissolved. We want to make those two cases. The only variable that switched here was, are we dealing with something tameh, or are we dealing with something tar? That was the variable. But they both dissolved. So the Gemara answers no. There's actually one other variable here. And that is that the first case was dealing with that it was only Aser Midrabanan. It was only Tamei Midrabanan because it was Tumas Mashkin. Tumas Mashkin means that there was a liquid that was Tamei. Now, liquid should not be able to make a Keli Tamei, but the rabbis instituted that, yes, it could. A liquid would be, a Keli can only become Tamei from an Avatama. A Keli would become a Rishon. A liquid is a Sheni. We say that no, the liquid could make the Keli Tamei, enough that the Keli could make other things Tamei. So if that's the case, so it's all rabbinic. The whole Tamei here was rabbinic, and that's why it's batal. But in the second case, we're not dealing with anything rabbinic. We're dealing with the carbon that's batal and chulin. That's biblical. That's why it's not batal. Gemara says, well, back to our original problem. If you're looking for a contrast, aval tama sheretz mai, what would be if it would be biblical tama, if a sheretz, this little creature that died, a dead creature, little I don't know, slug or lizard, something that gives off tuma. So that gives us tuma midaraisa. So what would be the din by that piece of carbon? That would not be batal. It would be leitala. It would not be batal. So adatani seifa. So why did you need to contrast this and say in the seifa that the reisha is yes batal, the seifa is not batal? What's the case where it's not batal? Aval chaticha shel chatas teres shenesavim chaticha shel chulin teres leitala. Your case of the seifa to contrast the yes batal with the no batal was a case of carbon in chulin. Niflig v'desi bedida. Why don't you divide the original case into two and say in the original case I have two types of tamei. I have tuma midirabanan and I have a tuma midiraisa. Tuma midirabanan is yes batal. Tuma midiraisa is not batal. Yeah, the Gemara doesn't like when, if I want to give a contrast in din, that I take a case from somewhere else. If this case itself could be divided into one yes and one no, then you should have divided this case into two. Gemara answers, well, back to our original answer, that we have a special chiddush when we're talking about something tahar that's not batal. Because something tamei not being batal, I already have opinions in the Mishnah and Trumas that maybe something tamei is not batal anyway. Over here, we wanted to say that even something tar is not batal. That was a chiddush. Rabba gives another teretz. Again, we're dealing with a brisa where in one case it's batal, one case it's not batal. And we're trying to figure out why that's so. So Rabba says, Reisha Isser Lav, Seifa Isser Karis. The Reisha, the first case of the brisa was talking about a tamei carbon, piece of a tamei carbon that fell into tahar pieces of karbanos. So he says that to eat that meat, even if it's not batal, it's only a negative prohibition. What's the second case? Is a carbon that fell into chulin. He says to eat that is a karis. If a zar, not a zar, if a if the person would be tamei, and he eats this food and it wasn't batal, then that would be karis. To eat kachim b'tumas aguf is isakaris. So that's why in the second case we say it's not batal. It's much stricter. Gemara says 1 second. We have a Gemara later, which the commentaries here don't really bring down, but there's a Gemara later where Rabba himself says that once it's a deraisa, there's no difference between lab and karis. This is not a good answer here. Gemara says, Kashi, you're right. That's a problematic for Rabba to say this. Ravashi gives a teretz over here. What's the difference in the brisa? He says, "Seif misham davli davar sheish lamatir and v'chol davar sheish lamatir nefibel flei batal." This is very interesting. There's a concept called the davar sheish lematirin, that anything that has a way out, we can find a way that this is permissible without using the laws of bittul. Bittul means nullification. What would that be? So in the two cases of the brisa was, the first case was a piece of carbon that was tamei. There's no heter for that fell into 100 pieces of a carbon that's tahar, the only way that this could become permissible is if it's batal. So we say, yes, it's batal. The second case of the brisa was where I had a piece of a carbon that fell into chulin. Now I have another way out, if even without saying batal. Feed it to a kayan. Feed it to a kayan. I have another way out. The Rav Ashi says, well, that's a davar sheish l'matirin. Don't say batal. It's not batal. You have to treat the whole mixture as if it's a carbon. The Gemara says, this statement of Rav Ashi is incorrect. Yeah, there's two versions of this. Barusa or Bedusa. Bedusa sounds like a joke. It's like not. How do they translate it? Mistake. It's a mistake. It's a mistake. Yeah. Because the Gemara explains why. It says, Laman, ila kayan, if you're talking about for a kayan, mishra shari. It's not a davar sheyesh le matirin. It is always mutter. And ila Yisrael, ila masr. And for Yisrael, it's always asr. What's a davar sheyesh le matirin? The original example of a davar sheyesh le matirin was the egg that was laid on Yom Tif. After Yom Tif, it's going to be mutter. In other words, even for those people that it's usher for, which is everyone. But after Yom Tif, everyone can eat it. But the bittul that's taking place here, right now, even before it fell in, the kohen was allowed to eat it. Now that it fell in, so the kohen can still eat it. There's no bittul there. In the Yisrael, before was not allowed to eat it. Now when it fell in, unless I say bittul, it's usher. So it's not really a davar sheish l'matirin. That's what the Gemara is saying.
The kiddush here would be davar sheish l'matirin.
On the person, yeah, for another person. And the Gemara is rejecting that, right? Yeah. In the Ran, in Rashi, it's easy to explain this. Because remember the machlekes Rashi and the Ran and davar sheish l'matirin. Rashi learns that a davar sheish l'matirin is, why should I apply the laws of bittul if this evening it's going to be mutter? Don't look for a heter. You'll be able to do it in a few moments, when it's going to be permissible. That's Rashi's pshat. Ran's pshat in davar sheish l'matirin was that since min b'minei leibatal, one type in the same type is not nullified. So what do I consider the same type? The physical matter or the spiritual isser? The fact that it's asr, is that considered? Basically what the Ran says is that if two things would be karbanos, it's not going to be batal because it's heter, it's both kachim bekachim. That's considered min b'minai, the same type in quality. In Ruchnius, it's the same type. So a davar sheyesh l'matirin, he says, since it has a time when it's going to be permissible, it's considered heter. And so therefore, when it falls into more heter, it's not considered batal because it's the same type in quality. Because it has a potential heter, so it's considered the same type. Now over here, it has a potential heter. For the other person, it's heter. So it's not as clear as it is in Rashi, according to the Ran. I still have a heter there. Anyway, whatever. That's all. The yeshiva would have fun with the Gemara like this. Spend the week on it. So okay, now v'savar Rabbi Yochanan truma b'zman hazeh d'oraisa. By the way, I didn't talk about the way Taisus learns the sugya is that we're dealing with a chaticha roya l'skabed. And but this carbon is a chaticha l'skabed. The way we make it not a chaticha l'skabed is by saying that it dissolved. We just explained it with davar shebeminyan, how it's sold and all of this. Taisus has a slightly different approach. And then there's a big discussion if real l'skabed for kayanim is considered real l'skabed, something that's a carbon. Chatir l'eskabed is something that be conserved at an elegant meal. It's not bottle. It's too significant. It's such a thing as bottle. So, but if you can only serve it to kayanim, is that considered real iskabed? That's this discussion in the thesis. Okay, now truma bisman hazeh deraisa. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Is that really so? V'hatanya, but we have a brisa like this. Shtei kupes. There's two boxes. Achar shel chulin v'achar shel truma. One has chulin in it, and one has truma. Two packages. Lefneim shtei son. And in front of them are two containers, measuring containers, a saw. So it's a measuring container the size of 144 eggs. Well, they got emptied.
Anything that's not truma, is that called chulin?
Yeah. Chulin is just regular food. Truma is food that has to go to a kayan and it has a sanctity. Well, one fell into the other. They fell into the two boxes. So, what do they call it? Murphy's Law. What could go wrong will go wrong, right? So that would be that the chulin fell into the truma and the truma fell into the chulin. But we don't say that. We say harei mutarim. We say that it's permissible. The opposite of that law. Shani yomer truma l'teich truma nafla v'chulin l'teich chulin nafla. We say the truma fell into the truma and the chulin fell into the chulin. Exactly, it's a different law. This would be, I don't know if there's a rule, but the one that's it's Thailand akilkul b'makolkol. The one that already has something wrong is now gonna get the next thing wrong. You know, it's like the one that the shlamazal, he's the one that like slips and whatever. So
it's the opposite of Murphy's Law.
it's the opposite.
If anything can
Right?
go right, goes right. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong.
Right. But this is like, you know, when it rains, it pours. The one that already has like the problem gets it worse. Okay. Here it's not a problem. Here it's truma. It has the limitation. Okay. So we're looking for Rabbi Yochanan's rule that truma is a deraisa. Now, V'amar Rish Lakish says, "V'hu sherabu chulin ala truma." Why are we so lenient? We say that the truma fell into the truma. You know why? Because even if the truma would have fallen into the chulin, it would have been batal b'roiv. So therefore, I know truma is not batal b'roiv. Truma is usually batal b'kuf aleph, in 100 and 101. But midiraisa would have been batal b'roiv. So, and maybe over here we're not even dealing with deraisa. Whatever the case is, I have a way out because it would have been batal. And so therefore we can say that don't worry, it's fine anyway. You know, either it's batal or, and even if it's not, so we say that it fell into the other one. or either it fell into the right one, and even if it's not, it's batal. No, in Rabbi Yochanan says, even if you don't have majority chulin over the truma, in other words, there's a large amount of truma that fell in to one of these boxes, he still says that it's going to be mutter. Now, I have no problem with Rish Lakish saying that truma is a derabanan, and nevertheless he requires majority chulin because he's strict. He says that even on the derabanan, I still want the majority. Allah Rabbi Yochanan kasha, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, not only is it a deraisa, but even on the deraisa, he doesn't require majority. That's something odd. How could he be so lenient? Truma is a deraisa. And we're just going to say that it fell into the right box, even though we don't know. And if it fell into the wrong box, we don't even have raiv. The Gemara says, Hamani Rabbanani. Rabbi Yochanan agrees that there is an opinion that holds truma as a derabanan. He just isn't following that. Why? He says that this brisa is the rabbanan that hold that truma is rabbanan. The rabbanan that truma is rabbinic. Bisman hazeh. Vanad amri ki Rabbi Yaisi. But what I was talking about on the Mishnah, now we're taking us back to our original discussion because we went through a whole digression. We're originally talking about a androgynous that marries, that's a kayan that marries a woman. Is she allowed to eat truma? Who said that, by the way? That were two sages, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. He says, so Rabbi Yochanan said that not only is she allowed to eat truma, she's even allowed to eat chazav v'shaik, the parts of the karbanos that are only for the kayan. She's a real kayan. She's a real kayaness, part of the family. It says, I'm following Rabbi Yossi. The Tanya was taught in a brayso b'Seder Olam. Remember Seder Olam? Seder Olam is Jewish history, is based on Seder Olam. One of the Tanaim wrote a timeline.
Yeah, I have a sefer at home. It's like a chronological index or something else.
Yeah.
Jewish history. Very interesting.
So, is that a translation of Seder Olam?
It could be, but what it is, it goes from year 0 in the Jewish calendar and
Wow.
up until present day, and it
Wow.
compares it from like the Julian calendar to Hebrew calendar.
So it couldn't go to the present day in Seder Olam. It would only go until the time of the Tanaim.
Oh, okay.
It couldn't go further than that. I'm not sure how far Seder Olam goes, but okay. So it says in Seder Olam, which he quotes here as a brisa. The brisa says, it's a pasuk. That your fathers inherited and bequeathed. It says, Yerusha Rishayna Vishniya Yeshlem. They have 2 inheritances. When they came into the land the first time, and based on this, there's another inheritance when they were exiled to Babylonia and they came back. That's also considered the second inheritance. However, but there is no third inheritance. Why not? Because when we were exiled the second time by Titus, by the destruction of the temple, we didn't lose the holiness of the land. The holiness of the land remained. If the holiness of the land remains, then Truma is still a deraisa. In other words, all of this is dependent on, do we say that the land still has the original holiness?
We discussed this earlier.
We've had this before. Do we say that the land of Israel still has its original holiness? Well, not its second holiness when they came back after the Golus Bavel. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Man Tana Seder Olam Rabbi Yossi. Who's the author of Seder Olam? It's Rabbi Yossi. Well, isn't this interesting? So Rabbi Yossi is the one that says that the land has its holiness, and therefore Truma is still a deraisa. And therefore, if a woman that marries an androgynous kayan is allowed to eat truma, that's because that's a real marriage. Because truma is deraisa. So it's Rabbi Yossi, in the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, that this is allowed. That's what he was following. Now the Gemara says, "V'savar Rabbi Yochanan b'derabanan leibinan ribuya." Yeah, we're getting into trouble because we quoted a case that Rabbi Yochanan said that you don't need, if you have 2 boxes, one truma, one chulin, and then you have 2 containers, that you have 2 measuring cups, one of truma, one chulin, and they fell into each other. They fell over into the boxes. So Rabbi Yochanan, the brisa says that the truma fell into truma. And we could be lenient like that. In the chulin, you could keep as chulin, so no problem. We said, but how much was it? It said, well, if it would have fallen into the chulin, if the truma would have fallen into chulin, it wouldn't have been majority chulin. And Rabbi Yochanan still said that it's fine. Why? He said, because it's rabbinic. How is it rabbinic? Because it's not following the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, it was following the opinion of Rabbana, where truma is rabbinic. The Gemara now says, really? Just because it's rabbinic, he's going to say that that's enough, that you don't need majority and rabbinic things? But we have a mission that says like this. Mikveh sheyesh bayarbaim sa mechuvanes. If the mikveh has exactly 40 sa, nasan sa v'natal sa kasher. The rule is that if you pull out 1 sa, it's really 41. You pull out 1 sa, and you replace it with some other liquid. Then you pull out another side and you place it with another liquid. You pull out another side, you place it, and you do this all day. At what point is it going to be not acceptable? Is you keep pulling out and putting back in something that wasn't acceptable, but even though it's as it is right now, it always has the exact amount. So it says it's kosher. Only until the majority. My love, is it not? That means that you can only do this 19 times. You have 40 saw. If you do it 20 times, then you've taken away from the original, it's already 50-50 from the new liquids that you're adding in, which is not acceptable. So you can only do it 19 times. In the Shtaya Ruba, you see, Rabbi Yochanan holds that even rabbinic, I guess She'uvim is rabbinic, and that's a whole discussion. But it's made Paris is there, right? So Taisus discusses it. Whatever the case is, we're seeing that Rabbi Yochanan does require the majority to be kosher. The Gemara says like nishkal rubai. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't require the majority to be kosher. Rabbi Yochanan only requires that you didn't take out the majority, but you're allowed to take 20. You can't take 21. Originally, we thought, see, Rabbi Yochanan says you can only take 19 and leave 21 inside because you need the majority. He says, no, you just can't take the majority out and replace it with the majority not, but he's not requiring a majority of kosher. That's our whole difference here. If you want, you could say Shani Achadikalameimar Shani Yomer. This is Shani Yomer, and one other thing we missed, like the key point over here. We did a comparison. Does Rabbi Yochanan require a majority? He said that he doesn't require a majority. You know why? That was because I could say that the chulin fell into the chulin and the truma fell into the truma. I still have a strong possibility, a 50-50% chance that maybe the truma fell into the truma. So therefore, over there, he doesn't require the majority. But over here, he does require the majority. Over here, there's no maybe something. Okay. The truth is, I still have a maybe. Maybe I took out exactly the liquid that I put in. But by liquid, you don't say that. By liquid, you say it mixed evenly. And I can't say that I took out, but I'm replacing it with May Paris or something, with fruit juice. I take a container of water out of the mikveh and pour fruit juice in or something, whatever. Okay, Tanan. We're basically concluded that discussion. Now we start the new piece. It says, androgynous nice. An androgynous is allowed to marry. That's the second part of the Mishnah. Is allowed to marry. Is allowed to marry a woman, just as if like androgynous is a man, considering him a man. Whose opinion is this? Probably Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon that said that if it would be a kayan, she could eat truma. An androgynous can marry a woman. Well, this is a kasha on Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish said that marriage is not really a good marriage. It's not a perfect marriage. And a kayan, even according to Rabbi Yossi, that marries a woman that's an androgynous, a kayan that's androgynous and marries a woman, she's only allowed to eat shuma midirabanan. Shuma midirabanan bisman hazeh. In the time of the temple, she wouldn't be allowed to eat shuma. The problem is that it says androgynous nice. And androgynous is allowed to get married. Now, if there's any question about his gender, then why are you saying lechatchila you're allowed to get married? Rish Lakish does have a question about his gender, but the Mishnah says lechatchila you're allowed to get married. It's a kasha on Rish Lakish. It doesn't fit together that you could say that there's a question about his gender, and then he's allowed to lechatchila marry a woman.
As if there's no question about it.
As if there's no question. The Gemara says, Tani im nasa. We amend the Mishnah. It doesn't say naisei. That means he's allowed to go ahead lechatchila, initially, and get married. They're saying if he did get married, this would be the case. The Gemara says v'hanaisik tani. It's not true. You read what the Mishnah says. It says that lechatchila is allowed to get married. The Gemara says according to what you're telling me, it says avaloi nisa. But the androgynous is not allowed to become married to a man. Now, are you telling me that that's only lechatchila? That he's not allowed to? No, it means even if a man married an androgynous, it's not a good marriage. So we're dealing with a b'di'evet. Elamai nisa, what does that mean? Di'evet. It means after the fact. Even if a man marries an androgynous, it's not a good marriage even after the fact, not just lechatchila.
Yeah, because it would be same-sex marriage.
Right, it would be right. So
Dragoness.
sounds like a problem.
That's a problem.
Unless there's a way out. There may be a way out. But just give me 1 second before you. That's a complication. So nice and nami di'evet. So therefore, we'll say that when it says nice, say that he's allowed to marry a woman, it's also only after the fact, not lechatchila. He's allowed. It means if he did, they're married. Okay. The Gemara says Amri loy. You don't have to say that. We could say like this. Nice is lechatchila mashma. When it says that he's allowed to marry, it really means lechatchila. Aval loy nisa is di'evet nami loy. But if he married a man, if a man married him, even di'evet it doesn't work. It's a kasha and Rish Lakish. Why? Because Rish Lakish said that it's not really a good marriage. And here we're saying that lechatchila, an androgynous is allowed to marry a woman. The Gemara says, 1 second. If you look in the Mishnah, it says if an androgynous marries another man, Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that there's a death penalty. What's it called? Lapidation. Skila. Why? It's a homosexual marriage. With a male and a male is a death penalty. Well,
that there wouldn't
that's
even be a marriage there.
Right. It just means a relationship. They had relations. Now, if that's the case, that it's Rabbi Eliezer saying it, then probably the Tanakama, we're not 100% sure about this.
That gets me thinking, like, what is a relationship with you guys? Like, there's no.
We'll get into it in a second.
I don't know.
You'll see in a second. Everything is going to get spelled out.
Okay.
So
Is that in?
it's coming up. No, it's coming up right here.
Oh. Okay.
So Michlal, the Tanakama is fukim misafkala. The Tanakama has a doubt. The Gemara says no. Tanakama does not have a doubt. In other words, the Tanakama knows that an androgynous with a man is a homosexual relationship. The only difference is, however, bein lamar mishra pshitale, everyone knows that it's 100% not acceptable. However, it could be nayos skila mishnei makaymas. The mar savar chevna skila mishnei makaymas, mar savar kazacher. Here's the question: a homosexual relationship, the biblical law is that it's a death penalty. That's the Torah law. Now, what exactly was that relationship? So it has to be that there was some sort of penetration. There was, but where was it? That was anally, right? It was in the back. What happens now with an androgynous? An androgynous has potential for both. Now, if an androgynous is a man, now the typical homosexual relationships is of course forbidden. But what about if it was the natural relations of a man and a woman, but the androgynous is a man?
They're all going to be.
Comes out is that even if it was the relations was as if it was a man with a woman, it would still be problematic with an androgynous. So that's what Rabbi Eliezer is saying. Rabbi Eliezer is saying that Chayavan alav skila kezachar. Oh, no. That it's only like a zachar. Only like a zachar. But according to the Tanakama, it would be prohibited even if it would be like a male and female relationship. Notice in the female part of the androgynous, that would still be considered a homosexual relationship, according to the Tanakama. All right. They're both male, despite that. Right. Yeah, we didn't expect this coming. Okay. Gemara says now, I'm a Rav. Rav says, the Mishnah said that according to Rabbi Yossi, if a woman marries, according to Rabbi Yossi and Reb Shimon, if a woman marries a Kayin androgynous, she's allowed to eat truma. The problem is there's a brisa that says differently, and so therefore let's forgo on the Mishnah and accept the brisa. We'll give up on the Mishnah. Less limit masnisin. The brisa is going to be more accepted. The Tanya, it says in the brisa, Rabbi Yossi androgynous beria b'fnei atzmi, v'lo yachriya b'chachamim zachem nekeva. Rabbi Yossi says in the brisa that androgynous is its own gender. We have three genders, according to Rabbi Yossi: male, female, and androgynous. It's not a doubt if it's male or female. It's its own beria b'fnei atzma. It's a third gender. So what are we saying now? That if a woman marries an androgynous, she shouldn't be allowed to eat truma. Androgynous isn't a male. It's not a real marriage. We say reject the Mishnah in front of the Brisa. Gemara says, Adarab, let's the Brisa become masnisin. The Brisa is never as reliable as the Mishnah. The Mishnah is more reliable. It says, no. In the Mishnah, we had Rabbi Yossi and Reb Shimon saying this. Why in the Brisa did we only have one? Because Rabbi Yossi then changed his mind, left Reb Shimon on his own opinion. You're on your own in this, and he went and he learned differently. So because Rabbi Yossi leaves Reb Shimon, it must mean that the Brisa is a later edition of Rabbi Yossi's view, and therefore Rabbi Yossi changed his mind. And now we have clearly that Rabbi Yossi changed his mind because in the Brisa you only have Rabbi Yossi. I don't know how the Gemara knows this. Could have been the other way. Could have been Rabbi Yossi said the Brisa, and all of a sudden Reb Shimon and Rabbi Yossi say the Mishnah. For some reason we're assuming that Rabbi Yossi and Reb Shimon had the opinion originally, and then Rabbi Yossi just leaves that group and has his own opinion. Shmuel Amar. Shmuel says the opposite. Let's reject the Brisa. The Mishnah says clearly, the Rabbi Yossi says it's a good marriage. The Gemara says, Adarabba, you have a problem. Shmuel says that you have to suspect to an individual opinion. Where did he say this? Shmuel says that we should be concerned. In other places, he says that we be concerned for an individual opinion. If that's the case, so why is Shmuel saying that? Oh, the marriage is perfect. We'd reject the Brisa, accept the Mishnah. The marriage is perfect. Androgynous with a woman, she's allowed to eat truma. 1 second, it's not 100% clear. I have an opinion in the Brisa that says no, and Shmuel says we should suspect such an opinion. It says Hani mili kilei misakar masnisin, avol ki misakar masnisin lechayesh. When does Shmuel say that you should suspect the other opinions? that's only if it still will allow the Mishnah to continue. But over here, the Mishnah clearly said that she's allowed to eat truma. If you're going to suspect of the other opinion, then she's not going to be allowed to eat truma. So we'll say that the Mishnah is going to be the one that's accurate. We'll only follow the Mishnah. Okay, let's leave it over here. Okay, this evening,
Oh yeah.
this evening, Amir Hashem will